Let me tell you a short story. The father had taught his child all that he knew about the world, what he understood. The child for a long time followed closely and diligently and looked up to her father. As the child grew, she started to notice parts of the world that conflicted with what her father had taught her. She didn't know how to reconcile this because it clashed so significantly with what she had been taught. She tried to bring this to her father, but her father, in fear, banished these ideas, afraid of the chaos, wanting to protect his child. The child, however, felt repressed, and suddenly the integrity of her father's guidance was ruptured. How could she trust him after he shut out these new ideas so abruptly? She was left with heart-wrenching questions which destabilized everything she understood about the world and herself. She felt alone. In time, this turned to anger. Anger at her father for leaving so much unaddressed, so much unacknowledged. In turn, the only way she understood how to make sense of this was to revolt against her father. She turned against him. She rejected everything she had been taught so that she could make space for what was unaddressed and unacknowledged. The father in turn felt betrayed, and in his anger he worked even harder to shut out the new ideas, desperately trying to establish the order he had worked so hard to develop. The two continued this cycle until there was nothing left between them that was stable. Suddenly both of their worlds were shaking beneath their feet. They only recognized themselves in opposition to each other. The only way they knew how to stabilize the ground beneath them was to try and bring the other down. Slowly but surely this is exactly what they did until there was nothing left and both of their worlds caved in. Now both were lost in the abyss. You're watching Archetypal Wisdom. Join me in exploring the symbolic truths and mysteries of humankind. Remember to like and subscribe. Now, back to the video. The father was devastated to see everything he had built collapse before him. Yet as he plunged into the abyss, he discovered more in that darkness than he had ever expected. With all familiar structures stripped away, he was forced to confront the very ideas he had once feared, ideas he had dismissed in his desperate attempt to preserve order. To his surprise, he began to see the hidden vitality within them. These new ways of thinking and seeing the world, once perceived as threats, now revealed a deep potential he had completely overlooked. He was left with profound grief for what had been lost, the new potential, his relationship with his daughter, and all the stable structures of the past. The daughter felt a deep sense of relief as everything that had once been guarded and kept at bay was now laid bare before her. She could finally see, in full clarity, the immense potential of ideas her father had always rejected. She could sense this all along, but now seeing it so clearly, she felt validated. However, with that validation came a deeper understanding. As she looked more closely, she began to see why he had shut these ideas out. Within the beauty and potential were forces that could unravel as easily as they could create. Suddenly monsters emerged from the great unbridled vitality of life, and she desperately tried to develop something to contain it, but didn't know how. It was then that the father and daughter found each other in the abyss. Her father apologized for all that he had missed, and she in turn apologized for all that she didn't realize. United in understanding, they worked rapidly to rebuild the world together. She used her natural ability to detect the new potential and sought her father's wisdom to help rebuild reliable structures that would keep them safe. Over time, they built a whole new world, one that maintained the wisdom of the ancient, along with the vitality of the new. How painful it can feel to be stuck between two worlds. How lonely it can feel to see value in both the old and the new. Is it possible that we can ever find balance as a society? Well, one of the themes that is playing out in this story is the phenomenon of psychological enantiodromia. I find this idea both troubling and comforting. To elaborate, psychological enantiodromia is the process of extreme one-sidedness in the psyche inevitably transforming into its opposite. The term enantiodromia was originally coined by Heraclitus, who believed everything turns into its opposite. But Carl Jung adopted and deepened it as a psychological principle. The core idea is that the psyche strives for balance naturally. This means that when we repress, over-identify, or even become inflated with one side of a polarity, the repressed opposite side gathers energy in the unconscious. Eventually, of course, the repressed opposite side bursts forth, overwhelming the conscious side or even destroying it. This swing to the opposite is not regression, but part of transformation. However, it is often violent and disorienting. The ultimate goal is not to stay in either pole, but to reach a higher level of integration where the opposites are held in a creative tension. What comforts me about this principle is the macro perspective. Everything ultimately runs its course. In the end, it will naturally stabilize. What's troubling about this idea is the volatile short-term process of opposites swinging intensely from one to the other. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem that there is any shortcut with this process. The reward of this is development and greater levels of insight, maturity, and understanding. The cost is often a volatile and even violent process. When I think about the collective of society, this comes to mind. We are in a state of extreme polarization, which is a result of repressed energy that had been brewing for many years. Just as the daughter in the story felt deeply disturbed by all that was being unaddressed, she swung to the other extreme of attacking her father, only for the father to become more staunch in his rigidity and repression. This is the cycle we seem to find ourselves in. The vitality of the new bubbles forth with all of its life and chaos, while the structures of the old tighten in resistance, overcompensating in their effort to preserve stability. Yet we see this play out all the time on the individual level. For example, someone who was identified with being completely rational and controlled in their life might suddenly become overwhelmed with an emotional breakdown. The years of repressed emotions that they didn't identify with suddenly burst forth with great force, sending them into a period of debilitating depression. Yet as disruptive and painful as this period of depression can be, it also holds great promise. If the individual can respect it and process it fully, it will transform their lived experience. Their new identity will include the rational prowess of before, but balanced with healthy awareness and acknowledgement of their feelings. Much like the father and the daughter understanding the other's perspective in the pain of the abyss and coming together to build a new world. While the division of our time is most certainly troubling, it seems that nature itself holds promise, that this is par for the course of development. I often ask myself, what can I do as a microcosm of this moment in time? Well, I do what I can to hold this tension of opposites within myself, to see what new perspective opens up within me when I have the courage to do so. Imagine what new frontier could emerge if we could all do this as a collective. Well, in time, I believe we will. Nature has a way of restoring balance, like rivers returning to their course after a flood. The only question is whether we meet that process with fear or with the courage to grow through it. You've been watching Archetypal Wisdom. Remember to like and subscribe. Stay wise.